In the heart of London, where royal protocol dictates every breath and gesture, a single moment of human vulnerability would shatter centuries of tradition. What happens when a 6-year-old princess's desperate cry pierces through the armor of royal duty? When a seasoned guard must choose between following orders and protecting an innocent child? This is the true story of how one terrifying afternoon transformed the British royal family forever, revealing that behind the crown jewels and palace walls, they are simply a family fighting to protect what matters most. The morning of October 15th began like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. Princess Charlotte, dressed in her navy school uniform with perfectly polished shoes, sat at the breakfast table picking at her porridge, while her mother Catherine, the Princess of Wales, reviewed the day's schedule with her private secretary. The 6-year-old's blonde hair was neatly braided, and she swung her legs impatiently under the ornate dining chair, already dreaming of the afternoon's promised visit to her great-grandmother's favorite rose garden. "Mummy, will we see the white roses today?" Charlotte asked, her bright blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. The Queen Consort had recently shared stories about Queen Elizabeth's special connection to the White Garden at Kensington Palace, and Charlotte had been fascinated by tales of how her great-grandmother would spend quiet moments among the blooms. Catherine smiled warmly, reaching over to adjust Charlotte's collar. "Yes, darling. After your lessons, we'll walk through the garden together. But remember, we must be very gentle with the flowers." Detective Inspector James Morrison stood quietly by the French windows, his trained eyes scanning the palace grounds, while remaining alert to the family's conversation. At 42, Morrison had been part of the Royal Protection Unit for over a decade. His weathered face bore the subtle lines of a man who had seen enough to understand that danger could emerge from the most unexpected places. Today, however, felt different. There was an unusual tension in the air that he couldn't quite place, like the electric feeling before a thunderstorm. Morrison's radio crackled softly with routine updates from other security personnel positioned around the palace. Everything appeared normal, yet his instincts, honed by years of military service before joining the protection unit, whispered otherwise. He glanced at his watch. 8:47 a.m. The morning security briefing had revealed nothing unusual, but Morrison had learned to trust his gut feelings more than written reports. As Charlotte finished her breakfast, Catherine gathered her into a gentle hug.
"Be good for Miss Thompson today, and I'll see you after lunch for our garden adventure."
Charlotte nodded enthusiastically, planting a sticky kiss on her mother's cheek before skipping toward the nursery wing where her governess waited.
The sound of her footsteps echoed through the marble corridors, a cheerful rhythm that seemed to brighten the ancient walls. The morning lessons passed peacefully. Charlotte worked on her reading with unusual focus, motivated by the promise of the afternoon outing. Miss Thompson, a kind woman in her 50s who had been with the family for 3 years, noticed the princess's excitement and decided to incorporate botany into their history lesson. "Did you know, Your Royal Highness, that roses have been symbols of England for over 500 years? Miss Thompson explained, showing Charlotte pictures of different rose varieties in a beautifully illustrated book. Charlotte's eyes widened with wonder. "Were there roses when the castle was built?" "Oh yes," Miss Thompson replied. "Roses have been growing in royal gardens long before this palace existed. They represent love, beauty, and the enduring nature of the monarchy itself." Meanwhile, Catherine was in her study, reviewing correspondence and preparing for an upcoming charity engagement. She had specifically kept the afternoon light, knowing how much Charlotte had been looking forward to their garden walk. The princess had been talking about it for days, ever since hearing the stories about Queen Elizabeth's love for the White Garden. Outside, Morrison conducted his routine perimeter check. He walked along the garden paths, his eyes noting every detail. The gardeners trimming hedges near the eastern wall, the maintenance crew working on the fountain, the quiet efficiency of the household staff going about their daily duties. Everything appeared normal, yet that nagging feeling persisted. At 11:30 a.m., Morrison received a message that would later prove significant. Intelligence had picked up chatter about potential disruptions in central London, though nothing specifically targeting the royal family. It was the kind of vague threat that security services dealt with regularly, but Morrison made a mental note to remain extra vigilant. Charlotte's lessons concluded at noon, and she practically vibrated with excitement as Miss Thompson helped her change into more suitable clothes for walking in the garden. She chose a soft pink cardigan and comfortable shoes, chattering nonstop about all the questions she wanted to ask her mother about the roses. "Do you think Great-Granny really talked to the flowers?" Charlotte asked as Miss Thompson brushed her hair. "I think your great-grandmother found peace in the garden," Miss Thompson replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes when we're quiet among beautiful things, we can hear our own hearts more clearly." Catherine appeared in the nursery doorway at 12:45 p.m. her face lighting up at the sight of her daughter's eager expression. "Ready for our adventure, Princess?" Charlotte launched herself into her mother's arms with such enthusiasm that Catherine laughed, the sound musical and genuine. "I've been ready forever, Mummy." As they prepared to leave for the garden, Morrison joined them, along with Detective Sergeant Sarah Williams, a newer member of the protection team, but already proving herself invaluable. Williams, at 31, brought fresh perspectives to royal security while maintaining the highest professional standards. "Beautiful day for a garden walk, Your Royal Highness," Williams commented to Catherine, who nodded appreciatively.
Charlotte has been looking forward to this all week, Catherine replied. "I think she's planning to inspect every single rose." The small party made their way through the palace corridors toward the garden entrance.
Charlotte skipped between her mother and the security officers, her joy infectious despite the formal protocols that governed their movements. Morrison found himself almost smiling at the child's enthusiasm, though his professional attention never wavered from their surroundings.
The White Garden at Kensington Palace was indeed spectacular. Designed as a tribute to Princess Diana, and later enhanced in memory of Queen Elizabeth, it featured over 40 varieties of white flowering plants.
The roses were in their final bloom of the season, their petals beginning to show the subtle changes that herald autumn's approach. Charlotte gasped with delight as they entered the garden proper. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the carefully maintained paths. The air was filled with the gentle fragrance of late-blooming roses and the distant sound of water from the memorial fountain.
"Oh, Mummy, it's like a fairy tale," Charlotte whispered, her voice filled with awe.
Catherine knelt beside her daughter, pointing toward a particularly stunning climbing rose that covered a nearby arbor. "That one was your great-grandmother's favorite." She called it the gentle giant because it grew so tall but had such delicate flowers. They walked slowly along the paths, Catherine answering Charlotte's endless questions about the different plants and their significance. Morrison and Williams maintained their professional distance while ensuring they could respond instantly to any situation. The garden, while beautiful, presented unique security challenges with its multiple entrances and varied terrain. As they paused near the central fountain, Charlotte suddenly grabbed her mother's hand. "Mummy, can we come here every week?" "I want to learn about all the flowers." "We'll see what we can arrange," Catherine replied, squeezing her daughter's small hand. "Would you like to sit on the bench and listen to the fountain for a few minutes?" Charlotte nodded eagerly, and they settled onto one of the memorial benches positioned to offer the best view of the garden. The afternoon was peaceful, almost magical in its serenity. Birds chirped softly in the surrounding trees, and the gentle splash of the fountain created a soothing rhythm. Morrison checked his watch. 1:23 p.m. They had been in the garden for nearly 30 minutes and everything remained calm. Yet something in the distance caught his attention. A black sedan was moving slowly along the perimeter road, its windows too darkly tinted for his comfort. He spoke quietly into his radio, requesting additional information about the vehicle. Charlotte was now lying on her stomach on the grass beside the bench, trying to get a closer look at some small white flowers growing near the fountain's edge. Her laughter rang out as she discovered a tiny butterfly resting on one of the blooms. "Mummy, look! It's like the flower has wings." Catherine smiled, pulling out her phone to capture the moment. The image would later become one of her most treasured photographs. Charlotte's face glowing with wonder as she observed the butterfly, completely absorbed in the natural beauty around her. Williams had also noticed the slow-moving sedan and was coordinating with the perimeter security team. The vehicle had made 2 passes along the external road, which, while not necessarily threatening, warranted closer attention. These were exactly the kinds of details that could prove significant in royal protection work. As they prepared to move to another section of the garden, Charlotte asked if they could walk to the very edge where the tall hedges created a natural boundary. Catherine agreed, thinking it would be educational for Charlotte to see how the garden transitioned into the surrounding landscape. They walked toward the eastern edge of the garden, where centuries-old oak trees created a canopy over the path. Charlotte ran ahead slightly, her excitement still bubbling over as she spotted new flowers and interesting plants. Catherine followed, enjoying her daughter's enthusiasm, while Morrison and Williams maintained their protective formation. The path curved gently through a section where the garden's formal design gave way to a more natural woodland setting. It was here, in this peaceful transition zone between the manicured royal garden and the wilder landscape beyond, that the afternoon's tranquility would soon be shattered. Morrison's radio crackled again, with an update about the sedan. The vehicle had now been stationary for several minutes in a location that provided a clear sightline to their current position. His training kicked in, and he began calculating the fastest routes back to the palace's secure areas while maintaining the casual appearance that royal protection demanded. Charlotte had discovered a small clearing where wildflowers grew among the formal plantings. She was kneeling among them, carefully examining each bloom, when the sound of car engines suddenly grew louder than the peaceful garden ambience should have allowed.
"Mummy, why are there so many cars today?" Charlotte asked, looking up with innocent curiosity. Catherine felt a flicker of concern but maintained her calm demeanor.
"Sometimes people visit the park area nearby, sweetheart. Shall we head back toward the roses now?" But before they could begin moving back toward the safety of the main garden, Morrison's entire body language changed. His hand moved to his earpiece and his expression became intensely focused. The afternoon that had begun with such joy and promise was about to take a terrifying turn that would test everyone's courage and forever change how the royal family understood the delicate balance between public duty and personal safety.
The first sign that something was wrong came through Morrison's earpiece at exactly 1:31 p.m. The voice of Control Room Supervisor Michael Chen was calm but urgent. "Alpha Team, we have 3 unidentified vehicles converging on your position. Black sedan, white van, and dark SUV. No advance notification, no official business.
Initiating immediate lockdown protocols." Morrison's blood ran cold. In his 10 years of royal protection, the phrase "converging on your position" had never been used during a routine garden walk. He glanced at Williams, whose hand had already moved instinctively toward the radio clipped to her jacket. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, communicating volumes without words. "Your Royal Highness," Morrison said quietly to Catherine, his voice steady, but carrying an undertone that made her look up immediately. "I think it would be wise to head back to the palace now." Catherine's maternal instincts kicked in before her royal training.
Something in Morrison's tone made her reach for Charlotte's hand. "Come along, darling.
"Let's go see if Cook has prepared any special treats for tea." But Charlotte was completely absorbed in watching a small beetle make its way across a fallen leaf.
"Just a few more minutes, Mummy?"
"I want to see where Mr. Beetle is going."
The innocence of the moment stood in stark contrast to the tension radiating from the protection officers. Morrison's earpiece crackled again. "Alpha Team. Vehicles have stopped approximately 200 meters from your position.
Occupants remain inside. Our response team is 7 minutes out." 7 minutes might as well have been 7 hours in a situation like this. Morrison made a rapid calculation.
The palace was a 4-minute walk through open garden areas, but the direct route would expose them completely. The longer path through the wooded section would provide cover but would take nearly 8 minutes.
"Charlotte," Catherine said more firmly, "we need to go now, sweetheart." The 6-year-old looked up, finally sensing the change in atmosphere. Her mother's voice had that particular quality that children recognize instinctively, the tone that means immediate obedience is required, no questions asked.
Morrison was already moving, positioning himself between the family and the direction of the unknown vehicles. Williams took the rear position, her hand resting on the concealed radio control that would summon immediate backup.
They began walking briskly toward the palace, trying to maintain the appearance of a normal conclusion to their garden visit. "Mummy, why are we walking so fast?" Charlotte asked, her small legs working to keep up with the suddenly urgent pace.
"We don't want to be late for tea," Catherine replied, lifting Charlotte into her arms. The princess didn't protest, sensing something in her mother's manner that made snuggling close seem like the right thing to do.
They had covered about 50 meters when Morrison's earpiece delivered news that made his heart rate spike. "Alpha Team, subject has exited the sedan. Male. Approximately 6 feet. Dark clothing. Second subject. Exiting white van. We cannot determine their intentions, but they appear to be moving toward the garden perimeter." Morrison's military training took over completely. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining Royal Protection, and the tactical situation was becoming clearer by the second. Unknown subjects. Coordinated arrival. Moving toward their position. These were not coincidences. "Ma'am," he said quietly to Catherine, "I need you to listen very carefully. We're going to take a different path back to the palace. Stay close to me, and if I tell you to do something, please do it immediately without questions." Catherine nodded, her arms tightening protectively around Charlotte. The princess looked between the adults' faces, her young mind beginning to understand that something serious was happening, even if she couldn't grasp exactly what. They veered left from the main path, heading into a section of the garden that was more heavily wooded. The canopy of oak and maple trees would provide visual concealment, but Morrison knew it was a double-edged sword. If the unknown subjects had hostile intentions, the trees would also limit escape routes and make backup response more difficult. Williams spoke quietly into her radio. "Control, Alpha Team is moving to secondary egress route. Request immediate sweep of all garden access points and full lockdown of palace approaches.
The response came back immediately. Copy, Alpha Team. Full security lockdown initiated. All non-essential personnel ordered to secure positions. Armed response team updated to your new route. ETA 5 minutes. Charlotte had gone very quiet in her mother's arms, her blue eyes wide as she looked around at the suddenly serious faces of the adults. "Mummy," she whispered, "are we playing a game?" "Something like that, darling," Catherine murmured, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Just stay very quiet for Mummy, okay?" They moved through the woodland section as quickly as Catherine could manage while carrying Charlotte. Morrison constantly scanned their surroundings, his trained eye noting every shadow, every movement in the trees, every possible position where a threat could emerge. The garden that had seemed so peaceful 30 minutes ago now felt like a maze of potential dangers. Williams's radio crackled with an update that made everyone's blood run cold. "Alpha Team, be advised that one subject has scaled the perimeter fence. Location unknown. Repeat, we have a potential breach of the secure perimeter." Morrison stopped immediately, holding up his hand to halt the group. In the sudden silence, they could hear sounds that didn't belong in the peaceful garden. Footsteps on gravel, the distant slam of a car door, and worst of all, voices calling to each other in tones that suggested coordination and purpose. "This way," Morrison whispered, leading them off the path entirely and into the deeper woods. The ground was softer here, covered with fallen leaves that muffled their footsteps. Catherine struggled slightly with Charlotte's weight, but she never complained or asked to slow down. Charlotte, despite being only 6 years old, seemed to understand instinctively that silence was crucial. She buried her face in her mother's shoulder and held on tightly, her small body tense with the anxiety that was radiating from all the adults around her. They had been moving through the trees for about 3 minutes when they heard it, the sound of someone crashing through the underbrush behind them, moving fast and not caring about stealth. Morrison's hand moved to his concealed weapon, though he desperately hoped he wouldn't need to use it. "Control," Williams whispered urgently into her radio. "We have sounds of pursuit, requesting immediate emergency response to our location." "Armed response team is 2 minutes out," came the reply. "Palace security reports all clear inside the building. Safe room is prepared and standing by." 2 minutes still seemed like an eternity. Morrison made a quick decision, spotting a large oak tree with a hollow at its base that would provide some concealment. He gestured for Catherine to move toward it with Charlotte. As they reached the tree, Charlotte finally spoke, her voice small and frightened. "Mummy, I'm scared." Catherine's heart broke at the fear in her daughter's voice, but she kept her own voice calm and reassuring. "I know, sweetheart. But see how these big, strong people are taking care of us. We're going to be just fine." Morrison positioned himself where he could see the direction they'd come from, while still protecting the family. Williams took a position that would allow her to cover their retreat toward the palace if necessary. Both officers were now in full tactical mode, their casual demeanor replaced by the focused intensity of professional protection specialists. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. Through the trees they could see flashes of dark clothing moving deliberately in their direction. Morrison counted at least 2 different individuals, possibly 3. His earpiece delivered constant updates from the control room, painting a picture of a coordinated effort to breach palace security. "Alpha Team," came Chen's voice through the radio. "Armed response team has arrived at the garden entrance. They are moving to intercept the pursuers. Maintain your position and prepare for extraction." Charlotte had begun to cry quietly. Not the loud wailing of a child's tantrum, but the soft, scared sobs of a little girl who knows something is very wrong. Catherine rocked her gently, whispering comforting words while her own heart pounded with maternal fear. "Shh, my brave girl," Catherine murmured. "Remember the story about the princess who was so brave that she helped save her whole kingdom? That's you, Charlotte. You're being so brave right now." Morrison heard the sound of radio communication from somewhere in the trees ahead of them. Their pursuers were coordinating with each other. Whatever this was, it was professional and planned. His grip tightened on his weapon as he prepared for the possibility that their peaceful afternoon was about to become something far more dangerous. The next few minutes would test everyone's training, courage, and devotion to protecting the innocent child who had started the day simply wanting to see her great-grandmother's favorite roses. In the distance, the sound of approaching sirens mixed with the rustle of autumn leaves, creating a soundtrack that perfectly captured the collision between royal tradition and modern security threats. Williams could see movement through the trees now, dark figures moving with purpose, clearly searching for something or someone. Her radio crackled with updates from the approaching security teams, but she knew that in situations like this,
Seconds could make the difference between safety and tragedy. Charlotte's quiet crying had stopped, but her small body was trembling against her mother's chest. Catherine continued to hold her close, her own fear carefully hidden behind the composed exterior that years of royal training had ingrained in her. But inside, she was simply a mother whose child was in danger, and that primitive instinct was stronger than any protocol or procedure. Morrison made eye contact with Williams and nodded toward a slight depression in the ground about 20 meters away, closer to the palace but still concealed by trees. If they could reach it, they would have better cover and a clearer path for the rescue teams to reach them. The decision to move would prove to be fateful, setting in motion the series of events that would lead to Charlotte's terrified cry and a royal guard's split-second decision that would change everything. Morrison's hand signal was clear. They needed to move to the better defensive position 20 meters away. Catherine nodded her understanding, adjusting her grip on Charlotte and preparing to run. What none of them could have anticipated was that the 6-year-old princess, despite her fear, still possessed the natural curiosity of a child who had spent the afternoon discovering the wonders of her great-grandmother's garden. As they began to move, Charlotte lifted her head from her mother's shoulder and looked back toward the path they had taken. In that moment of childhood innocence, she saw something that would haunt her dreams for months to come. A man in dark clothing holding what she didn't understand was a camera with a long lens, but what looked to her frightened eyes like a weapon pointed directly at them.
"Mummy!" Charlotte screamed, her voice carrying across the garden with a clarity that pierced through all the tactical radio chatter and professional whispers. "The bad man has a gun." The sound of that terrified cry did something that no amount of training could have prepared the security team for.
In that instant, every protocol, every carefully planned procedure, every consideration of diplomatic consequences evaporated. Morrison and Williams heard not the voice of a future queen, not a symbol of the monarchy, but the pure terror of a child who believed she was about to see her mother hurt. Morrison spun toward the direction Charlotte was pointing, his weapon drawn and trained on the figure in the trees. "Armed police, show me your hands now." The man with the camera, who turned out to be a freelance photographer who had bribed a maintenance worker for information about the royal family's garden schedule, panicked at the sight of an armed officer. Instead of dropping his camera and complying, he turned and ran, his flight triggering every pursuit instinct Morrison possessed. Williams was immediately on her radio. "Control, we had a situation. Suspect fleeing toward the eastern perimeter. Princess is safe but extremely distressed. Requesting immediate medical support and counseling team."
But Charlotte's scream had done more than identify a threat. It had shattered something fundamental in the careful balance between public duty and private family life that the royal family had worked so hard to maintain.
The sound of pure terror from a 6-year-old child echoed across the garden and, via the radio communications, into the palace itself, where it was heard by everyone from senior staff to the Prince of Wales himself. Catherine sank to her knees beside the oak tree, still holding Charlotte, who was now crying with the intensity that follows a deep fright. "It's okay, my brave girl," she whispered, though her own voice was shaking. "The bad man is gone. This is the book. It's about history. I know it. You're safe. Mummy's here." Charlotte's sobs were heartbreaking. Between gasps, she managed to say, I thought he was going to hurt you, Mummy. I was so scared." Morrison lowered his weapon but remained vigilant as the sounds of the security sweep continued around them. His earpiece was alive with updates. The photographer had been apprehended at the perimeter fence. 2 other individuals had been detained for questioning, and the armed response team had secured the entire garden area. But the damage was done, not physical damage. No one had been hurt. No actual weapon had been present. No real attack had occurred. The damage was deeper and more complex. A child's sense of safety had been shattered, and with it, fundamental questions about how the royal family could continue to live any kind of normal life. Williams approached carefully, her maternal instincts overriding her professional training as she saw Charlotte's distress. "Princess Charlotte," she said gently, crouching down to child level. "You were so brave to tell us what you saw. You helped keep everyone safe today." Charlotte looked up with tear-streaked cheeks. "But I was so scared," she whispered. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Williams explained, her voice gentle but sure. "Being brave means you do the right thing, even when you are scared. And you did exactly the right thing today." The sound of approaching footsteps through the trees announced the arrival of the full security team, followed moments later by medical personnel and, most importantly to Charlotte, her father. Prince William had been in his office when the alert came through, and he had run through the palace corridors and across the gardens with a speed that ignored all protocol. "Charlotte, Catherine," William called as he crashed through the trees, his usually composed demeanor completely abandoned in favor of paternal panic. Charlotte's face lit up despite her tears when she saw her father. "Daddy, there was a scary man, but the police officers saved us." William swept both his wife and daughter into his arms, not caring that his formal suit was getting dirty from the forest floor or that his arrival had created a security nightmare for his own protection team.
"Are you both all right? Were you hurt?" "We're fine," Catherine assured him, though her voice still carried the tremor of someone whose adrenaline was slowly subsiding. Charlotte was incredibly brave. She alerted us to the danger, but William could see in his daughter's eyes that something had changed. The carefree innocence that had characterized her morning questions about roses and butterflies had been replaced by a new awareness that the world contained genuine dangers, that people might want to hurt her family, and that even something as simple as a walk in the garden could become frightening without warning. Morrison approached the family group carefully.
"Your Royal Highnesses, we need to return to the palace immediately. We have the situation contained, but we need to complete our security assessment." William nodded, lifting Charlotte into his arms. As they walked back through the garden, Charlotte kept looking over her father's shoulder toward the trees where she had seen the man with the camera. "Daddy," she said quietly, "why did the bad man want to take pictures of us?" It was a question that would prove difficult to answer in a way that a 6-year-old could understand. How do you explain to a child that her very existence as a member of the royal family makes her a target of interest for people who don't care about her safety or privacy? How do you maintain a sense of normal childhood when that childhood exists under constant scrutiny and potential threat? "Sometimes people are very curious about our family," William said carefully. "But that doesn't give them the right to scare you or make you feel unsafe. That's why we have people like Detective Morrison and Detective Williams to protect us." Charlotte nodded solemnly, but she tightened her arms around her father's neck. "Can we still visit the roses again?" she asked. "Of course we can," William assured her. "But we'll make sure you feel completely safe when we do." As they reached the palace, Charlotte made a request that would lead to significant changes in royal security protocols. "Daddy, next time we go to see the roses, can the police car come with us so if there are any more bad men, we can get away really fast?" It was an innocent suggestion from a child who had just experienced her first real fright, but it would spark a conversation that would ultimately transform how the royal family approached the balance between public engagement and personal safety. Charlotte's terrified cry in the garden hadn't just alerted security to a threat, it had exposed the impossible position that royal children are placed in from the moment they're born. The afternoon that had begun with excitement about roses and butterflies had become a stark reminder that even the most innocent family activities carried risks that ordinary families never had to consider. As they entered the safety of the palace, Charlotte's adventure in the garden was over, but the consequences of those frightening minutes in the woods were only just beginning. The image of a 6-year-old princess asking for a police car to accompany future garden visits would become a symbol of how the monarchy was grappling with the realities of modern security threats. Charlotte's experience would lead to policy changes, enhanced protection protocols, and most importantly, new approaches to helping royal children maintain some sense of normal childhood, despite the extraordinary circumstances of their lives. In the coming days, as the story of the garden incident became public, Charlotte's courage in alerting her family to danger would be praised. But privately, within the palace walls, difficult conversations were beginning about how to protect the innocence of royal children, while preparing them for the realities of their public roles. The Rose Garden would remain one of Charlotte's favorite places, but she would never again experience it with the carefree wonder of that October morning. In its place was a new awareness that being a princess meant more than wearing pretty dresses and visiting beautiful gardens. It meant living with the knowledge that extraordinary measures were necessary to keep her family safe, and that sometimes, even on the most ordinary Tuesday, everything could change in an instant. 3 days after the garden incident, Charlotte was still having nightmares. Catherine would find her daughter standing at the nursery window in the early morning hours, looking out at the gardens with a mixture of longing and fear that broke her heart. The trauma counselor who had been quietly brought to the palace explained that children Charlotte's age often process frightening experiences through repetitive behavior and questions that adults might find exhausting, but which were perfectly normal responses to what she had experienced. "She's trying to regain a sense of control over her environment," Dr. Sarah Martinez explained to Catherine and William during a private session in the family's sitting room. "When children feel powerless in a scary situation, they often try to find ways to feel safe again." Her request for a police car wasn't just about the immediate threat. It was about wanting to have an escape plan that she could understand and trust.
Dr. Martinez had worked with children affected by trauma for over 15 years, but this was her first time treating a member of the royal family.
The unique pressures faced by royal children added layers of complexity to what was already a delicate therapeutic situation. The challenge for Charlotte, Dr. Press,
Martinez continued, is that she's beginning to understand that her life is fundamentally different from other children's lives. But she doesn't yet have the cognitive development to process why that difference means she might face dangers that other children don't encounter.
Meanwhile, Detective Inspector Morrison was dealing with his own aftermath from the incident.
The investigation had revealed that the photographer, Marcus Webb, was a freelance paparazzi who had been attempting to get exclusive shots of the royal family in an unguarded moment. He had paid a maintenance worker £2,000 for information about the family's garden schedule and had recruited two associates to help him monitor escape routes and coordinate timing. While no laws had technically been broken, the photographer had been on public land adjacent to the palace grounds. The incident had exposed significant vulnerabilities in the security protocols for informal family activities. Morrison found himself testifying before an internal security review board, not as a subject of investigation but as a key witness whose quick thinking had prevented what could have been a much more serious situation.
Detective Inspector Morrison asked Commander Patricia Hughes, head of the Royal Protection Unit, in your assessment, what were the key factors that allowed this incident to escalate to the point where Princess Charlotte became aware of a potential threat?
Morrison had spent sleepless nights analyzing every decision made that afternoon. Ma'am, the fundamental challenge is that normal family activities require a level of openness that creates security vulnerabilities.
The princess wanted to explore areas of the garden that are harder to monitor completely. Our protocols assumed that the perimeter was secure, but they didn't account for sophisticated surveillance from beyond the official boundaries. Commander Hughes nodded thoughtfully.
And Detective Williams' report indicates that the princess's alert actually provided crucial information that your surveillance had missed.
Yes, ma'am.
Princess Charlotte saw the photographer's telephoto lens before we identified him as a threat.
Per warning, while frightening for her, potentially prevented him from obtaining the images he was seeking and helped us apprehend him more quickly. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. A 6-year-old child had proved to be more observant than a sophisticated security apparatus. It was both a testament to Charlotte's intelligence and alertness, and a sobering reminder of the limitations of traditional protection methods. Back in the palace, Charlotte was working through her emotions in the way that children do, through play, questions, and the gradual reconstruction of her understanding of the world. She had begun playing elaborate games with her dolls where royal families were protected by teams of toy soldiers and police cars. Catherine watched these games with a mixture of pride and sadness, recognizing her daughter's resilience while mourning the loss of her innocence. "Mommy," Charlotte said one morning over breakfast, "when I'm queen someday, can I make a rule that people can't have cameras in gardens?" Catherine paused, struck by the sophistication of the question. Charlotte was already thinking about how she might use future authority to address the problem she had experienced.
Well, sweetheart, being queen means working with lots of other people to make decisions that are fair for everyone. What do you think would be fair about cameras? Charlotte considered this seriously.
Maybe people could have cameras, but they would have to ask permission first. And if children said no, then they would have to listen. It was a remarkably nuanced response from a 6-year-old, and it showed that Charlotte was processing not just her own fear, but beginning to understand the broader implications of privacy, consent, and the power dynamics that shaped her life. Dr. Martinez had recommended that the family gradually reintroduce garden visits, but with modifications that would help Charlotte feel secure while slowly rebuilding her confidence.
The first step was a very brief visit to the rose garden, with a full security detail visible and a clear route back to the palace. Charlotte had agreed to this, but only if she could bring her favorite stuffed animal, Mr.
Bear, to help her be brave. The planned return to the garden was scheduled for the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the incident. Morrison and Williams worked with the security team to develop a protocol that would be reassuring to Charlotte while maintaining adequate protection. They decided to include a police vehicle parked visibly near the garden entrance, not because it was necessary for security, but because Charlotte had specifically requested it as something that would make her feel safer. She needs to see that her voice matters, that her feelings about her own safety are being taken seriously, Dr. Martinez explained. For children who have experienced a loss of control, being able to influence their environment in meaningful ways is crucial for psychological recovery. The morning of the planned garden visit, Charlotte woke up early and spent an unusually long time getting dressed, changing outfits twice and insisting on wearing her most comfortable shoes for running just in case. Catherine recognized these behaviors as her daughter's way of preparing for something that felt scary but important. At breakfast, Charlotte announced, I'm ready to see the roses again, but I want to talk to Detective Morrison first. I have some questions. When Morrison arrived for the pre-visit security briefing, Charlotte was waiting for him in the family sitting room, holding Mr. Bear and wearing an expression of serious concentration that was both endearing and heartbreaking. Detective Morrison, Charlotte began formally. I want to know exactly what will happen if there are any bad men today. Morrison knelt down to Charlotte's eye level, understanding that this conversation was crucial for her sense of security. Well, Princess Charlotte, first we have checked the entire garden this morning, and we have officers watching all the places where anyone could come in. If we see anyone who shouldn't be there, we will tell you and your mummy to come with us to the police car, and we'll all go back to the palace together. Charlotte nodded seriously. And you promise you'll tell me what's happening? I don't like being scared without knowing why. I promise, Morrison said solemnly. You were very brave last week when you told us about the man with the camera. If you see anything that worries you today, you can tell me immediately, and I will listen. Charlotte seemed satisfied with this answer. She hugged Mr. Bear tighter and announced, Okay, I'm ready to be brave again. As they prepared to leave for the garden, Charlotte made one more request that would lead to the day's most significant moment. Daddy, can you come with us today? I think the Roses would like to meet you too. William had cleared his schedule to be present for Charlotte's return to the garden, understanding that his presence would provide an additional layer of emotional security for his daughter. As the family prepared to walk through the palace corridors toward the garden, Charlotte slipped her hand into her father's and said quietly, Daddy, I've been thinking about what happened last week.
What have you been thinking about, sweetheart? I think maybe the man with the camera was scared too.
Maybe he didn't know that taking pictures would frighten me. Do you think we could teach people how to take pictures without being scary? William stopped walking, struck by his daughter's capacity for empathy even after her frightening experience.
That's a very thoughtful idea, Charlotte. What do you think we could tell them? Maybe they could say hello first?
And ask if it's okay? And maybe they could smile so children know they're friendly?
It was a suggestion born from a child's logic, but it contained the seeds of what would eventually become new guidelines for media interaction with royal children.
Charlotte's ability to think beyond her own fear, to consider the humanity of someone who had frightened her, showed a wisdom that impressed everyone who heard about her suggestion. As they approached the garden entrance, Charlotte could see the police car that had been positioned exactly where she had requested.
The sight of it seemed to give her confidence, and she walked more steadily, though she kept a firm grip on both her father's hand and Mr. Bear.
The next few minutes in the garden would test whether the careful preparations and therapeutic work had succeeded in helping Charlotte reclaim a place that held such special meaning for her family. But more importantly, they would reveal whether a frightened child could transform her experience of vulnerability into a source of strength and understanding that would serve her well in the unique challenges of royal life that lay ahead. The return to the White Garden began with Charlotte standing at the entrance, her small hand gripping her father's while she surveyed the familiar paths with new eyes. The police car sat precisely where she had requested it, its presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of how much had changed since her last visit. Detective Morrison stood nearby, his professional demeanor softened by genuine concern for the brave little girl who had helped save her family the week before. The roses look the same, Charlotte observed quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and uncertainty. But everything feels different. William squeezed her hand gently. Different isn't necessarily bad, sweetheart. Sometimes when we learn new things about how to stay safe, places can feel different but still be special. Charlotte nodded solemnly, then took a tentative step forward into the garden. Mr. Bear remained clutched tightly in her free arm, his familiar presence providing the courage she needed to move beyond the security of the entrance. Catherine walked close behind, ready to offer comfort or retreat if Charlotte became overwhelmed. Dr. Martinez had prepared them for this moment, explaining that children often need to revisit traumatic locations at their own pace, with the understanding that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Charlotte was demonstrating that wisdom with each careful step deeper into the garden. Mummy, Charlotte said suddenly, stopping near the fountain where they had sat the previous week. I remember sitting here and being so happy. Can we try to be happy here again? Catherine's heart ached with pride at her daughter's determination. Of course we can, darling. Would you like to sit on the bench again? Charlotte considered this seriously, looking around at all the security officers positioned throughout the garden. Morrison caught her eye and nodded reassuringly, a small gesture that seemed to give her confidence.
Detective Williams was also present, having volunteered to be part of Charlotte's return despite it being her day off.
I think, Charlotte said slowly, I would like to sit on the bench, but can Detective Morrison sit with us? He helped keep us safe before, and I want to thank him properly.
Morrison looked to William and Catherine for permission, receiving their grateful nods. This wasn't standard protocol, but nothing about Charlotte's situation was standard.
She was a child processing trauma while simultaneously learning to navigate the unique responsibilities of her royal position. As they settled onto the memorial bench, Charlotte carefully arranged Mr. Carolide.
Bare on her lap and looked directly at Morrison. Detective Morrison, I've been thinking about what happened last week, and I want you to know that I'm not scared of you anymore. Morrison looked puzzled.
Were you scared of me, Princess Charlotte? A little bit, she admitted with 6-year-old honesty. When you had your police voice and told the bad man to show his hands, I thought maybe you were angry too. But Mummy explained that sometimes police officers have to use their strong voices to keep people safe, even when they're not angry at all. Morrison felt a lump in his throat.
In all his years of royal protection, he had never considered how his tactical responses might appear to a young child. You're absolutely right, Princess Charlotte. I wasn't angry. I was worried about keeping you and your family safe. But I can understand how my voice might have seemed scary. Charlotte nodded seriously. I think maybe next time, if there's ever a next time, you could tell me in your regular voice what you're going to do.
So I know that your police voice isn't because I did something wrong?
The sophistication of her request stunned all the adults. Charlotte was essentially asking for a modified security protocol that would keep her informed during crisis situations, not because she wanted to be in control, but because she needed to understand what was happening in order to feel safe. That's a very good idea, Morrison agreed. Would it help if I explained to you now what we do to keep the garden safe every day? Charlotte brightened immediately.
Yes, please.
I want to understand how everything works. For the next 20 minutes, Morrison gave Charlotte a child-appropriate explanation of garden security measures. He showed her how the officers communicated with each other, explained why they positioned themselves in different locations, and helped her understand that their job was to watch for problems so that families could enjoy beautiful places without worry.
Charlotte listened with intense concentration, asking thoughtful questions and gradually relaxing as she began to understand the systems designed to protect her.
When Morrison explained how the perimeter was monitored, she asked, "So if someone wants to take pictures, you'll know they're there before they get too close?" "Exactly," Morrison confirmed.
And if someone has a camera, we'll talk to them and make sure they understand the rules about taking pictures respectfully. Charlotte's face lit up with an idea. Detective Morrison, do you remember how I said maybe people with cameras should ask permission first?
I've been thinking about that more. What if we made a sign for the garden that says this is a special family place? Please be respectful.
Then people would know without us having to be scared first. Catherine and William exchanged amazed glances.
Their 6-year-old daughter was essentially proposing a public education approach to privacy protection. Her suggestion demonstrated not only her recovery from trauma, but her development of mature problem-solving skills.
That's a wonderful idea, Charlotte, William said. What else do you think the sign should say? Charlotte thought carefully, unconsciously stroking Mr. Bear's fur as she considered. Maybe it could say that children come here to learn about flowers and feel peaceful, so everyone should help keep it feeling safe and happy.
Dr. Martinez had explained that children who successfully process trauma often emerge with increased empathy and problem-solving abilities. Charlotte was proving this theory beautifully, transforming her frightening experience into advocacy for other children who might visit the garden. As they walked toward the area where Charlotte had first spotted the photographer, she stopped and pointed to the trees. That's where I saw the man with the camera. But now I know that you were already watching him, Detective Morrison. I wasn't the only one keeping my family safe.
Morrison nodded. You were an important part of the team that day, Princess Charlotte.
Your quick thinking helped us protect everyone.
Charlotte beamed with pride at being called part of the team. "Do you go to the garden? Can I always be part of the team when we come to the garden?"
"Absolutely," Morrison assured her.
You're very good at noticing things that are important. They spent another hour in the garden, with Charlotte gradually returning to her natural curiosity about the plants and flowers. She asked Catherine about the different roses, collected interesting leaves for her nature journal, and even convinced Williams to help her identify a butterfly that had landed on one of the memorial flowers. As they prepared to leave, Charlotte made a request that would become a new family tradition. Can we come back next week? But can we invite Detective Morrison and Detective Williams to have a picnic with us?
I think they would like to see the roses when they're not working so hard to watch for bad men.
Catherine smiled. I think that's a lovely idea, sweetheart. What do you think we should pack for a garden picnic? Sandwiches and fruit and biscuits, Charlotte replied immediately. And maybe we could bring some flowers to put on the bench, to say thank you to great-grandmother for making such a beautiful place for families to feel safe and happy. As they walked back toward the palace, Charlotte turned to wave goodbye to the garden. I'm glad we came back, she announced. I was scared, but being scared and being safe can happen at the same time. And now I know that there are lots of people working to help families feel safe in beautiful places. William lifted Charlotte into his arms for the final walk to the palace. You've learned something very important today, sweetheart. What's that, Daddy? That courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is about doing important things even when you are afraid, and trusting the people who care about you to help keep you safe. Charlotte nodded seriously, then brightened. And courage is also about making sure other children feel safe too, right? That's why we're going to make the sign for the garden? Exactly right, William confirmed. As they entered the palace, Charlotte was already planning her sign for the garden, her picnic menu for the following week, and her next nature journal entry. The frightening experience that had begun with her terrified cry of "Stop the car" had been transformed through courage, support, and wisdom into a foundation for understanding both her vulnerability and her strength. The little princess who had started that Tuesday morning simply wanting to see roses had learned lessons about security, resilience, and leadership that would serve her well throughout her life. Most importantly, she had discovered that even in a world where extraordinary precautions were necessary to keep her safe, it was still possible to find wonder, build relationships, and create positive change. The White Garden remained special to Charlotte, but now it carried additional meaning as the place where she learned that being brave doesn't mean being unafraid. It means being afraid and choosing to trust, to hope, and to work toward making the world a little safer and kinder for everyone. Her weekly garden visits with the security team would become legendary within palace circles, not just for their breach of protocol, but for their demonstration of how even the youngest member of the royal family could transform challenge into opportunity and fear into wisdom. Stop the car. Royal Guard smashes the window, after Charlotte cries out.